Hello, I'm Michael Parker, and welcome to episode 22 of Antidote. On May 17th of this year, several motorcycle clubs were scheduled to have a meeting at a restaurant in Waco, Texas. But before that meeting could begin, gunshots rang out in the parking lot, and within minutes, 9 people were dead, 27 people were injured, and eventually 170 people would be arrested. So joining us today to try to make sense of what happened in Waco is the founder and CEO of Brent Coon and Associates in Beaumont, Texas. Brent, welcome to Antidote.
Thank you, good to be here.
Brent, I understand you are a prominent trial lawyer in the state of Texas, but you're also a biker, and your firm has been retained by some of the attendees at the meeting that day. So I was wondering, first of all, if we could kind of just let the audience know who called this meeting and what was the purpose of it initially?
Yeah, good question. The purpose of the meeting is a legislative update. Basically what you have in Texas and in almost all the other states are confederations of clubs, and they have loose-knit associations that support bike rights. So it may be a helmet law issue, it may be a bike awareness, motorcyclist awareness issue that they're taking to the legislature at any given time, or monitoring bills or other activities that are being presented at a House debate with a House or Senate, a legislative assembly in the state. So the clubs want to stay involved in this. They'd like to contribute to a cause of being able to not only monitor these things, but submit their own proactive legislation as well. Again, most of it geared towards motorcycle safety and things of that nature. And they had these meetings in Texas about 8 times a year. They call these meetings at various places around the state for convenience to the various clubs. And most of the clubs that you see where they wear the jackets and they have the names of them on there, the organized clubs, most of them send a representative or a number of representatives to these things, kind of like delegates. And they go and they hear from someone that is an officer of that association to tell them this is what's going on, these are things to be aware of, kind of like an update as a liaison between in our case, Austin, where the legislation is taking place, and passing that word back to the delegates. And that's what was taking place, or supposed to take place this day in Waco.
Which is not quite the way it was portrayed initially in the press or by the Waco PD, who made it sound like these are people from out of town who've come into our town to rumble, raise hell, and cause problems. So really they were there for, as you say, a legislative meeting amongst motorcycle clubs. We had several different clubs there. I know we had the Banditos, the Cossacks, the Scimitars, but there was probably a half a dozen different clubs present. Is that correct?
Well, there were probably, I don't have an actual count of the number of clubs, but well in excess of a dozen. We know just from our discussions with some of the what you call the bikers and motorcyclists that were there, that there was a wide range of representatives from a number of different clubs throughout the state. So it wasn't, as the press did initially report, which was given to them, the reports came directly from Waco PD and their spokespersons, that this was a gang activity, that these biker guys will all come to town, as you said, to get, to make a scene and cause trouble.
Yeah.
And that was not the case at all. In fact, they had these meetings 8 times a year all over the state. They never have any problems. Certainly some of these clubs don't get along well with some of the other ones, but they respect the right to assembly, and it's extraordinarily rare for any of them to have any significant trouble at any of these assembled meetings.
Understood. I know that some of the bikers, I mean, one guy brought his wife, and he's like, hey, if I was going to a dangerous type of situation, I'm not going to bring my wife. But from what I'm understanding, because the stories have kind of changed and evolved over the weeks, and much of the journalism that has been done by this guy, Aging Rebel, has been very good. He stayed on this thing, almost daily. It appears that the initial reports that there was some form of a skirmish in the parking lot, perhaps between the Cossacks and the Banditos, and that perhaps 1, 2, 3 shots of a small firearm may have gone off, and then immediately following that, there was just a hail of bullets, most likely largely from the law agencies.
That could be true. Again, we don't know for sure. I've talked to a number of people that were there at the time Some of what was cast there as a fist fight or something between rivals from two different clubs occurring in the parking lot is consistent with everyone we've talked to. The issue of a firearm, who pulled one, and whether or not a shot was fired from any firearm between those two or another is more debatable at this juncture. What is clear is that whatever started out in the parking lot there with these two individuals very quickly turned into a hail of bullets, mostly coming from law enforcement.
When I start reading about the law enforcement that was there, it raises a lot of questions to me, because first they said there were 22 cops, 10 of which were SWAT, there was Waco PD, there's Texas Department of Safety, there may have been ATF, there may have been FBI, and the weapons that they had were, military grade weapons. We're talking about these F9 P90 machine guns and armor piercing bullets, yet they say they only fired, I think, maybe 40 some odd rounds, and only 4 of the cops did this, but we've got 9 people dead within like about a 2-minute period from the time that this began, which I believe was 12:41, and the shooting was over at like 12:43. So literally in 2 minutes, these people die, the 27 people are injured. And then, so the next question I have is, they start arresting just everybody, and they arrest
Everybody with a motorcycle.
like 180 people. Explain to me what this is, because what they're calling this is engaging in organized criminal activity. What is that? What is that law?
Well, this would be like if it was a mob meeting of all the 5 families. That's how the press ran with this, because this was what local law enforcement was reporting, that this was basically a mob mafia kind of deal, that these were all outlaw motorcycle clubs, that they came to town for the express purpose of selling some scores with each other by whatever means necessary. And that's the reason that there was a large presence with law enforcement there. And that was far from the truth. What we do know as a fact is that this was a normally scheduled 8-time-of-year legislative assembly. This is what you have under the right to assemble, and all of these clubs from all over the state participate. The vast majority of them very much law-abiding clubs. In fact, one of my clients, everybody in his family works for law enforcement. Even his mother worked for law enforcement. He's never been in trouble with the law. He works for a 1-chapter club that's only goal as a 12-member club is to protect kids that have been in abused environments, working with CASA and some of those groups as a protector. And these guys some of them come from law enforcement, they come from fire departments. There's all sorts of places these guys come to, and they have a common bond riding motorcycles. So they tend to form either a local club or a club that may have regional or even national subchapters. But the reality here is this is just a call meeting. They have them all over the place, all year, every year, and representatives of many different clubs are there to get a briefing on what's supposed to happen.
Well, my next question.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Well, my next question is that they start arresting all of these people, and initially it looked like it was 170, then it went up to 182, and then it seems like they unarrested 5 people, which we'll get to in a moment. But what I'm not clear upon is, if you've got this skirmish that occurred, I just don't understand how you can blanket arrest 170 some odd people, charge them with the same thing, and then the Justice of the Peace put the bail bond at $1 million.
Yeah, $1 million for each one of them. For example, one of my clients had just ridden up to the parking lot, had not even gotten off his bike, sees what goes down there, runs for cover, comes out of that after all the shooting, and finds himself initially in jail on a smaller bond. I think it's $25,000. That was posted. Then he was called back in and put a warrant out for him with the standard $1 million bond. And he's had to hire a criminal attorney to deal with that. We do civil work, but he had to hire a criminal attorney to deal with his bond issue again. And even after getting out, he is not allowed to talk to anyone in his club. He's not allowed to be out after dark. He's not allowed to drink alcohol. A lot of very strange parameters on this, which are very atypical of any kind of a bond scenario.
Well, this is an extraordinarily high bond amount. And then, from what I also understand, they confiscate everybody's cell phones. You know, people that were just there who had nothing to do with the event. If they had a cell phone out and they were trying to take some footage of everything that happened, because there's another restaurant as well called Don Carlos, I believe. So there's people from both restaurants adjacent to each other, and I believe they're sharing a parking lot. So they confiscate all these cell phones. They impound motorcycles, they impound vehicles, pickups, and I mean, this just seems like unlawful search and seizure. Am I wrong?
Well, that's one of the arguments, obviously. You have to remember that Waco is where we had the Branch Davidians, and
Yes.
people can go back and remember that in hindsight, seeing the video and looking at it historically, it did appear that there was an excess use of force that resulted in a lot of women and children at compound unnecessarily dying. In this case, you even if you assume the worst case scenario on the police department's side, that they felt that two or more of these clubs were going to be outlaw clubs, that they were going to cause trouble, even if you assume that to be true, you can't go out and whitewash with a blanket indictment, literally or figuratively, all the other attendees. With any homework done by the Waco Police Department and others, they would know that this is a standard legislative assembly bill, that they do these all over the state, that they had them dozens of times over the years, that they had all been held without any incident, and that there was no true reason for them to believe that there would be this melee in the parking lot. And unfortunately, they came in loaded for bear. They had sniper rifles with suppressors and all this, and they have a perimeter set up there. And the question is, motorcyclists aren't stupid. So the first thing would be, if any motorcyclists were going there for any kind of trouble, the last place they would want to go ahead and follow through is in a parking lot that's surrounded with a bunch of police with sniper rifles.
Agreed. It makes no sense. And I would even counter as well. It's like, it sounds like the law enforcement agencies, well, you mentioned snipers. I mean, they had them positioned in a way that they could be seen, yet they weren't in position where I would say where they could immediately take control. Like, why not just put a vehicle right there in the middle of the parking lot and say, listen, if you guys are going to come in here, you're going to park your bikes and you're going to go inside peacefully. Why remain on the perimeters of the situation and lie in wait? That seems sketchy to me.
Absolutely. That's the question. Why are you there set up around the perimeter? If you're really concerned about anything happening there, why do you have plain clothing? Why wouldn't you just be there wearing your uniforms, having police vehicles centrally located in the parking lot, a heavy show of presence by law enforcement there at the parking lot? Texas is an open carry state, but you could go back and still say, if you get in here, we've worked with the restaurant, we don't want any weapons around here. And there were things they could have done proactively, and instead it seemed like they were more set up in an ambush mode, waiting for something to happen. And it's clear that there was a gross overreaction to what happened because so many people were killed. And then you see the follow-up of that, which is everybody that went and attended. This is just a public restaurant. Twin Peaks, for your audience that doesn't know, is a lot like a Hooters type restaurant. It's it's a beer and hamburgers kind of place, and they're a national franchise, and this was one of the individual franchises. And it's a place that a lot of bike guys go, but everybody else goes there too. Even families go there. And this wasn't rented out just for this event. There were lots of other people that were no doubt likely to go and have a meal and a cold beer that afternoon at that site as well. So it was handled very poorly across the board. The real question now is, Michael, why did it happen? Why was there such a gross overreaction? Why were police there with sniper rifles? Why suppressors? Why so many people shot and killed? And at some point it'll come out. You'll be able to do ballistics. You'll see what guns killed what people. And it's probably going to portray a lot of this in a different light. Right now you have someone in law enforcement's put in charge of the grand jury. So it asks you a lot more questions about the lack of transparency with what happened out there. They're not releasing any of the video. I think the last I saw, there were several dozen news affiliates, including all the majors, have filed motions requesting copies of the surveillance videos and others, and it's all under lock and key right now. And what we hope happens is that as all of this other information comes out, as the video comes out, as ballistics come out, and we find out more really about what happened, as the people that were there can speak. Again, most of these guys that were there that are eyewitnesses aren't even allowed to talk about this and don't want to talk about it because they have criminal charges hanging over their heads. So one side said everything they want to say. The other side hasn't even been able to respond. And that's one of the things we're working on with the biking community is to where maybe the individuals can't really say anything right now, but certainly the organizations and associations can. And our firm and the clients that we have, as well as others, can certainly work with a more effective voice to communicate to a broader audience what the facts really are.
Understood. And initially, the press was pretty softball on this. They didn't really seem to want to touch it. I mean, I've been following this thing for a couple of months. When I would reach out to journalists, people didn't want to talk to me about this. And it seems to me like the only guy who was really doing much work on this was the aging rebel. And if you follow his story, he says that some of this video that's been released, I don't remember which restaurant this was from, well, there's a couple of strange things going on here. It appears that perhaps there were at least 2 undercover cops that may have been part of the Cossacks who took off their Cossacks jackets and put on police windbreakers after the firefight was over. And then in another piece of video, it looks like perhaps a gun or piece of evidence is stashed next to a vehicle by one individual and then found 15 minutes later or so by another. So, I mean, this does not look good.
No, there's nothing about anything that happened that day that looks good. Unfortunately, everything that just superficially looks bad will probably be heightened with real facts once the rest of them come out. Again, the police department's been very quiet about this issue. The people that are working with them are quiet about it. The court system over there has engaged in a lot of suppression of evidence. So right or wrong, very little of what actually happened and full accounts of what happened is being disseminated anywhere right now. But where from all the people I talked to, and granted, I'm not talking to the police officers on this deal, they've said publicly what they think happened, but we've been able to talk to a number of the eyewitnesses, and there are incredible amounts of inconsistencies about what they said. The bigger concern is this, and it's twofold. One of which is that so many people that were there innocently, even if you assume that there was trouble to be made by a couple of the outlaw groups, there were so many other groups there unaffiliated with them. Law enforcement knows they're not affiliated with them, yet they still threw a blanket indictment over all of them. They basically went out and rounded up everybody there that was there for the motorcycle event and brought all of them in and ended up putting $1 million bails on them. And that alone, some of these guys sat in jail for months. Some of them may still be sitting there, not even being able to post bail on something that they're charged with an indictment of racketeering and all this criminal activity. And there's no evidence. There's zero evidence that most of these people were engaged in any kind of criminal activity that day or any other day of their life. And yet you still had affidavits, rubber stamped by law enforcement there saying that they were all engaged in that with no other evidence. And that's what was used to arrest all these people and detain them so long. So that's problem one. Problem two is when you have now the media covers all of these incidents of police brutality. And I've represented law enforcement before, and we do work with them. And my uncle was a sheriff, so we're all in favor of strong law enforcement. But you also don't want bad law enforcement. And unfortunately, there have been a number of incidents in the media of late that seem to indicate officers using poor judgment that resulted in someone getting hurt or even killed. And when that's happened, it's become national news for weeks involving one police officer and one detainee or one victim, whatever you want to call it. And yet here you have a number of police officers, entire agencies perhaps, involved in a big shootout with, and maybe it's not even a shootout. We don't know how many people are actually firing back, but you have 9 people killed, dozens more sent to the hospital with various sorts of injuries, and 150 plus more that weren't taken to the hospital or taken to the morgue brought in. And yet there's been almost zero coverage. It's kind of like, hey, there was a shootout with a bunch of bad biker people and the cops came in and saved the day. And yet that was the story that came out that first day and nothing was said since. And you would wonder where the investigative reporting is on that and where the press would be in wanting to follow up. It's been a very quiet issue with the national press.
It seems to me like the autopsies and the ballistics results should be complete by now. I mean, how hard is it to find out what kind of bullet went in a man's head or chest? And we know what types of weapons that the police have. I mean, I've got the list here somewhere if I could dig through and find it. But I mean, they must have that information already, and they are sitting on it. And all of the shell casings were gathered up within 24 hours. So they have that forensic evidence. So we could deduce, if we had the information, who shot whom.
Yeah, I think that, and again, it also depends on who's providing all of this post-incident investigative work. Are there outside agencies that are coming in truly independent? Is this going to be something that's more whitewashed? Is there a reason to whitewash it? Is everything that happened just like the initial police reports? If so, what's the problem with releasing all the videos and other information that would be out there to support and corroborate the police account of what happened? I do know this. They went in saying that this was a bunch of outlaw biker clubs, that they were all engaged in criminal activity. I do know that to be patently false. So if that's false, and you know that's false, stands to reason a lot of the other things that they're saying in this case are suspect.
I agree. And now I ask you this because you're going to represent some of the people who were there. Listen, if these people get thrown in jail, 170 some odd people, or originally 182, then when they let 5 go, okay, these people had been in jail. I believe towards the end of July, there were 3 people left who still had not made bond. And the people who had gotten out on bond, their bond numbers had been wildly varying. So
Sure.
my question is, if this is false imprisonment, I mean, it looks to me like the city of Waco's got a world of trouble in the near future, because this could cost a lot of money to settle, because lawsuits should be coming up right and left, I'd think.
I would think that after the dust settles, you'll see a significant number of lawsuits. I do know the people that we've talked to were incensed about what happened.
Sure.
But have not wanted to say much publicly because of the fear of reprisals with the justice system over there until their matters on the criminal side are resolved. So I do know a number of people are in the hurry up and then wait and see because of the criminal issues that are still being held over their head. We also know that early on with the Waco Police Department, that there was a policy in place of reducing your bond in exchange for an agreement not to make a legal claim. Those are totally unenforceable. We've heard from several different sources, including people that were there, that did occur. I've not actually seen the documents to prove that did occur, but if in fact that was going on, again, another big red flag. Everywhere we look in this case about what happened and what was going on were more red flags. I know one of my clients was left in his handcuffs for somewhere around 18 hours. I know another client lost a 6-figure-a-year job from sitting in jail for a month. This is his income. The people that were sitting there in jail, one, not being able to go to work for months, saying that you were part of a big biker shootout in Waco, often results in you losing your job. 2 is
Certainly.
sitting in that jail for a month causes you to lose your job. So a lot of people, even when they get out, if they had good, solid, law-abiding careers, many times those are tainted to the point where they come home unemployed. So those are the kinds of deals that go down. And then you can't forget the fact that regardless of these people sitting in jail for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months on trumped up charges, totally fictitious charges, totally fictitious. People that just pulled in the parking lot that have never had anything to do with any of these issues being charged with organized crime when they're there just to get information about what happened at a trip to Austin from some of the delegates that had gone there to follow the course of the bill through the legislative process. To charge them fraudulently and rubber stamp those is total BS. And but you still have 9 people dead, dozens with serious injuries, some may be critical. Those, what happens to all those folks? So there's a lot out there. And if in fact the police are correct and said this was going to be something that we knew was going to happen, which is why we had the law enforcement there, and we told the Twin Peaks people not to have it because of that, and they told us that they were going to do it anyway, it brings up other issues. The restaurant has a responsibility to provide a reasonably safe and secure place for people to dine. And if in fact there were a number of strong forewarnings about the problems that were coming to a head at this legislative meeting, then there are other people to look at in terms of responsibility.
Understood, and I want to be clear that I certainly am not trying to pick on the Waco police. It's just this case, it seems so extraordinary. People being locked up for months on end, $1 million bails, and just the strange way the whole thing came about. It's worthy of more attention than it has drawn, and that's the reason that I wanted to bring it up. The one last thing is I'll ask you to speculate, and you can tell me if you don't want to do it or not, but do you think that this was some kind of ATF or FBI operation that just went wrong and this thing was instigated by law enforcement?
I would say with no evidence right now, it would be purely speculative, but we do know that ATF and DOJ follow some of the 1% groups. They do have people that work within those organizations for intel, undercover, as you would say. So it would not surprise me that there were undercover elements that have been following one or more of the biker groups that were in attendance that day. And if that was the case, it would be very unlikely that those would have come from Waco Police Department.
Got it. All right. Well, I tell you what, we're going to leave it there. Brent, I appreciate you coming on. I know you're a busy man. I wish you luck in this. I doubt you're going to need it. I think you're going to handle it just fine. But I appreciate you spending time with us here on Antidote, and we will keep following the story. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we will stay on this story as it proceeds and give you more information as it comes down the pike. 177 people in jail, some of them upwards of 2.5 months. That just doesn't sound right to me. And $1 million bail, I mean, you've got to do something pretty bad to get that type of bail. So it's an unusual story, it's an extraordinary story, and there's certainly more to it than what is on the surface. My name is Michael Parker. This is Antidote. I appreciate you watching. Please share this with your friends and your neighbors, and give us your thoughts below in the comments. Keep it classy. And until next week, we are the Antidote.